Hey guys, and welcome to another one of our podcasts. As always, I'm joined by my co host over in Germany, Manuel.
Guys.
That's something. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, but we're going to do things a little differently here. The podcast is going to be a little more condensed, a little shorter, and we're also going to be covering some other topics besides just the ghost countries we cover on the channel. Maybe not in this episode, but going forward. So, anyway, yeah, let's get to it. So, Manuel, what do you think about the episode starting off?
Um, for me, the episode had some rather interesting facts. It
Mm-hmm.
was not, for me personally, my favorite episode
Oh,
so
sure.
far, but it was rather interesting because there were a lot of things that I had no idea about.
Sure.
Um, like for example, people I think heard about the Western Sahara, but what that conflict was actually about, I think that was pretty new for most people.
Mm-hmm.
um and also that the whole story basically goes back into the Berber times, as you mentioned.
Well, yeah,
um
we were talking a little bit before, and not to cut you off there, but I was saying we were doing a little discussion before we started recording, and just to pick up on that point, and start off the podcast, I guess. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look into a people like the Sahrawis or the Sahrawi, um, because they are, nowadays they have a Berber core with considerable Arab influence, but I mean, they do predate the arrival of the Arabs and Islam in North Africa, as do most of the other, Berber people, the indigenous people of North Africa. And I just think I don't know, it's kind of interesting, in my opinion, at least, to see how that, you know, played out through history. Because really, when you look into it, the story of the Sahrawi and the Western Sahara is connected to a lot of those historical changes that occurred in North Africa. I mean, these are a distinct ethnic group. They're a distinct people who stand in contrast to the Moroccans and other groups in the area, the Algerians, the Mauritanians, etc.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a thing which a lot of people are not really aware of, or were aware of,
Hmm.
before watching our episode. So I definitely think that is pretty interesting. Also, I gotta admit, always when I hear about the Berbers,
Mm-hmm.
I know that there was a people, or is a people, but I also do always think about the Berber lions.
Ah,
Um,
do you mean the Barbary lion?
I don't. They call the Barbary lion
I'm pretty sure it's Barbary lion.
because here we call them, in Germany we call them Berber
Oh,
lion.
okay, I didn't know that. In English, at least, Barbary. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, those are those in the Atlas Mountains and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. So I always got to think about this when I hear that word. But uh, yeah, I mean, as I said, it's a cool episode. It's unfortunately not really my time period.
Mm-hmm.
That is where my focus is on. For me, that's more like, well, ancient history, or let's say things before 1800 mostly.
Sure. Oh no, I
but
get
it,
that. I get that.
but it's not like I am totally. I mean, I'm still interested in the history after that, but not as much as nowadays. But I think it is rather interestingly also to see that there is basically, kind of border in the desert right now,
Mm-hmm.
formed basically by trenches and guns.
Ah, you mean the wall,
Um,
the Moroccan Western
yeah,
Saharan wall?
yeah. It's actually, I was not aware of this whole stuff. I heard there was a conflict, but I thought it was a cold conflict.
Well,
Um,
in some ways, it was up until recently again.
no, I mean like a kind of like diplomatic issue, and not,
Ah,
yeah. So I thought like where weapons were actually not involved, but actually they are involved, just not used.
yeah. Well,
Um,
again, up until somewhat recently.
yeah. So yeah, and also what you just mentioned, that it was actually there was some movement in that whole conflict here. Um, for example, as I heard that Erdogan was, I mean, the Turkish president, stepping up the game in that regard. Also, I think it was something related with Israel and an exchange he promised Morocco to support their claim on the Western Sahara. I think there was something like this.
I don't think
Um,
Turkey currently supports or recognizes, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. But to your point, it is interesting to see how this does play a role in international and, of course, regional affairs between Morocco and Algeria. But yeah, no, it is interesting because I'm trying to remember my numbers here. It was like 84 UN members and South Ossetia recognized um, whatchamacallit, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. But over the years, that has changed. 43 have suspended, frozen, or withdrawn that recognition. I think one of the biggest ones I can think of being India. But there is this regional dynamic going on there because there's definitely a lot of diplomatic tit for tat stuff going on. And it's very much a political issue in a way.
I was just checking it out, and I'll say one thing though. I'm not sure if that is 100% correct.
Mm-hmm.
The source is Morocco World News,
Okay.
and they said that, I mean, they cited Erdogan in 2013 with the
Oh.
words, "Turkey doesn't and will never support Polisario Front," and in November of 2020, so exactly a year ago, there was written that Turkey was cracking down on a political solution of the conflict. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what happened since then.
No, that is interesting. And I mean, if you throw Saudi Arabia and Iran into the mix, this becomes a whole, it actually has connections to conflicts and diplomatic tug of wars, outside of North Africa itself. I do want to take
Yeah.
one step back just for a second, because when you mentioned the Berber people, and we were talking about, how they exist in, well, obviously not just Morocco, there's some 50 to 70 million ethnic Berber people. Now that's, the numbers are debated a little bit. Morocco has somewhere between 18 to 20 million, but Algeria also has a very significant population, from what I'm seeing, about 9 to 13 million. And actually, another ghost country we may cover at some point, and I am almost confident my pronunciation is going to be horrible here, is Kabylia, which is a historic region in northern Algeria, which has a very sizable Berber population. And there has been a push for independence over the years. I mean, you can go back to the Black Spring, which occurred in 2001. And there's also the so-called Berber Spring, which predates that in the 1980s. Long story short, there is a cultural, ethnic, and historical identity in that region. And it's another conflict that I think, probably even more so than that in the Western Sahara, really just gets overlooked, at least I think in Western media for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. Since you just mentioned that, actually, I was at first I thought you were going to mention another kingdom,
Hmm.
um, for something to cover, and that would be, and you just said like your pronunciation probably is not good, but trust me, I'm on my way. The kingdom of Tlemcen,
I
Tlemcen.
I have
I
no
have
idea.
no idea
I
how
have
to
no idea
pronounce
what you're
that.
talking about.
Tlemcen. If there is anybody out there who knows how to pronounce that, please tell us.
Wait, that was Tlemcen.
Tlemcen. It's nowadays still a city, I think, but it was also the name of a kingdom, which existed from 1235 to 1554. Um, and that's also something which, I mean, it must have been somewhere between Algeria and Morocco and Tunisia, I think.
I am somewhat familiar with this one. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I do recognize their flag.
Yeah. So, yeah, at first I thought you were gonna say that one, but yeah, it's definitely something for, at least I can say, for Europeans, where we don't really know a lot
Hmm.
about that geographical area.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of population and stuff.
Well, and speaking on behalf, and I probably shouldn't, but of, America, I was going to say, like, I don't think these conflicts are, this is not just an American thing or a European thing. I think you could say generally, there's not a lot of interest in these lesser known conflicts unless they make headlines. And that's just the nature of news. But I think that's what makes them interesting at the same time, that they are forgotten or ignored in one form or another.
And I also got to say, maybe it was a little unfair what I said before Europeans, because I can imagine there are areas which have a sizable population from that geographic area where people probably know a little more about that whole conflict there than in comparison to me.
But still, I think it's a fair point to say it's generally, it doesn't get the attention maybe it's owed.
Yeah, that's true.
And actually, sorry.
No, it's your turn.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, actually, since we haven't done it for a little while now, and we do have plans for them, so don't worry. But flags. What do you think about the Berber ethnic flag? I actually think it's a pretty cool design. It's got some coloration you don't see too often, blue, green, and yellow. And then in the middle, you've got that traditional symbol. I think it's an interesting design.
Yeah, it definitely is not something, I mean, what everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know what that symbol actually is?
If I'm remembering this correctly, it's called Tefigna, which is a script.
I've seen that somewhere, but I don't know where.
Well, it's part of the script of the Berber language. At least there's regional variants, of course, but yeah. And the entire flag, symbolizes like the Berber people living harmony in their land.
I kind of like it when countries or ethnic groups, in this case, put symbols into their flags which are related to their history.
Well, then that brings up a question, because we were talking about this before we started recording. What do you think of the SADR's flag, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic's flag? Like, see, I personally, I think it's a perfectly fine design. I mean, I think the Star and Crescent adds a little bit of, flair to it, but I don't think you felt the same way.
No, I absolutely love it. No, I mean...
You think it's too generic?
Yeah, for me, it's a little too generic. It doesn't stand out, in my opinion. It's like, I think the problem is that there are a whole many flags who are very similar to this flag.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's just like, I can't tell which country is which if I just see the flags out there. I mean, there are countries where, of course, it's the same, but I think this is like, the reason why the flag is like this is because these are kind of like religious colors or something like that. I don't remember anymore, but there was a reason why there were so many flags who have a similar design.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It for me, it's always like, when there are already a lot of flags like this out there, maybe you should take a different one. Yeah. So that's why, for example, I like flags like the South Korean one, the Brazilian, because they add something to it. It's like recognizable. You see that,
sure.
And you're like, oh, this is South Korea. Oh, this is Brazil. But if I saw, like, for example, the one of the SADR, I would say, I don't know, something from the Middle East or Northern Africa. That's
sure.
probably what I would think, but I couldn't tell you which one.
No, I will agree with you. It isn't super distinct. I mean, yes, it is different in design, obviously, because of that Star and Crescent. But it's very similar to other designs out there. Actually, in that same vein, what do you think about Chad and Romania's flag? I mean, they're literally the same, basically.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think this was a coincidence. I don't know if the people of Chad were... I don't even know who got their flag before. I guess Romania, because it probably was independent before.
Yeah, and I say basically just because there is a slight variation in the color, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I think actually happened when they did that flag? They were not aware that there's another country who had that flag already, so they just adopted that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, it's
yeah.
it's the same flag essentially.
I mean, imagine these were times where Google didn't exist; they couldn't search it up.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so returning to Western Sahara. So, like we talked about in the episode, about 20 to 25% of the territory is controlled by the Polisario Front, so the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, the remainder being controlled by Morocco. The diplomatic situation has changed as of late, with more countries coming to recognize Morocco's claims of sovereignty over the Western Sahara. But going back in time a bit, I wonder, and I know we're stepping into a little bit of opinion here, but what are your thoughts on this? Because Morocco did, throughout its long history, have control over the region at various times. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Almoravids, and then more recently the Alawite dynasty. There definitely was historic control over that part of North Africa and other parts as well. And I mean, of course, if we skip ahead, the UN said virtually the same thing in regards to Morocco and Mauritania's claims. Yes, they had some historic claims to the region, but nothing that amounted to sovereignty. So I'm just wondering, what's your take on that? Because Morocco historically, before the colonial era, was a much larger entity, depending at the period of time we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there we get to the difficult question of these kind of disputes, which are basically always coming back in history, not only in this region but everywhere.
Sure.
So does former possession of an area justify that you possess them right now? And I think it's difficult. It's understandable that people feel this way, but for me, it depends a little on the population on the ground. What's their take on that? And I know that probably a lot of people will disagree on that stuff and so on, but yeah, it's just difficult because, I mean, if we have this situation with Morocco could also say, yeah, okay, so we want our territories until Timbuktu.
Well, yeah, historically they stretched that far. Yeah.
Yeah. So, or for example, tomorrow Italy comes up. Okay, by the way, we want Turkey back because once we possessed that, or France. So it's difficult to make a claim on something like this. I mean, if it's like a core territory, which is like deeply ingrained in the country's DNA. I mean, that's a wrong term, but I hope people understand what I mean. Then it's a different story, I think. But if it's like the situation how it is right now, I think the most fair way would be to let the people on the ground decide over it. But of course I understand why it's not. I mean, it's also not only a thing about feelings and stuff, but also about strategic resources and stuff like that. But I don't know. What's your opinion about that?
Well, I will say, just picking up on that last note, that's the one thing that I think is interesting with the Western Sahara. It looks like a completely useless bit of land because it's like nothing but desert, but there actually is a lot of economic potential in that region, from various phosphates and minerals in the interior to the rich, relatively untapped fishing grounds off of its coast. It's not a completely useless bit of territory, so it makes sense why at one point Morocco and Mauritania wanted to claim the region. But I mean, to be fair, not all of this was exactly known at the time. There's also talks of like oil or natural gas, other things that can be done. So the point I'm just trying to say is that has changed over time, the economic incentive for the countries, but there was, even at the very beginning in the 1900s, so 1950s, 1960s, there was still an economic motivation in part, I would say. But no, I would agree. I mean, the situation, it was very clear at least I think so, that there was, based on the evidence that's available, significant, desire on the part of the Sahrawi people for autonomy or, to shape their own future. And again, the UN reports and investigation into it seem to kind of reinforce that. But the situation on the ground changed very quickly. I mean, you had the region in essence, when the Spanish pulled out, Morocco and Mauritania came in. You had the start of a conflict in the region that eventually saw Mauritania leave. You saw Morocco solidify its position. You saw a conflict between Morocco and the Polisario. And then you saw those lines, that wall in the desert essentially come in at the end, and that essentially resulted in a stalemate that resulted in a peace treaty and more or less brought us to the current situation, when things began to deteriorate and the treaty was thrown out the window. But I agree with you. It's, I would say I agree. Long story short.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do want to pick up on that point quickly. It is interesting. I think I shouldn't keep saying it's interesting, but I think it's logical that when Morocco achieved its independence, and to a degree you could say the same with Mauritania, they both looked at the Western Sahara, which still then was, a Spanish colonial territory at the time. It makes sense that they both looked to that region for various reasons.
Yeah, that's true.
And I also think that's a very interesting chapter of history, the Ifni War, the Forgotten War. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to see this weird kind of, colonial war occurring in in 1957 in that small little Spanish enclave. And even though Spain won, I mean, they did win it militarily, I guess you could say. They returned Cape Juby to Morocco and later did the same with Ifni in 69. So Spain, despite having achieved a military victory, I think political and obviously the UN was pushing things over time. Spain was basically looking for an exit at that point. And when that exit did come, it came very quickly.
Yeah, surprisingly quick. Yeah.
Well, and I think you could argue that played a very big role in the events that occurred afterwards because it essentially created a power vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. That's always the root of every conflict, a power vacuum, or at least many conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one thing, I mean, a little off topic here.
Sure.
But I gotta say, actually, the clips that we had in this episode, I think they were really good.
Oh, yeah. It took a lot of digging to find some of those, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I think they were really good. Just one thing. When I was doing the subtitles for this episode, when there was that man speaking in his voice from the 1960s.
Oh, yeah. I remember this.
That was so difficult to understand. I mean, to understand what he was talking about, yeah, that was totally easy. But there were certain words. It was like, what is that word? So I was like, what is that? I had to search around. What does that mean? And then, yeah, but I remember that being a big problem, actually, because he was talking about, and then 19 years later, there came, I don't know, I can't imitate that.
I can't do the 1930s, radio voice. I know it wasn't from the 30s, but it's like that, stereotypical sound.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the clips were really, really great. So yeah, good job.
Oh, and I love including those historic newsreels. Honestly, I think those things are great because they give a really good overview. I mean, yeah, it's succinct, but still, I think it's a good overview of international, news at the time. And I don't know. I love including those things when we can.
Yeah, agreed.
So, okay, back to what you and I were talking about a little bit, though. I mean, so, we both agree in principle that, and I know this is opinion based. We're giving our opinion here that, in principle, people of the area, if they desire independence, okay. But like we said, the situation on the ground was not that. Things changed very quickly. But what I also want to say was interesting is during all of what was going on, during the Ifni War, during all this stuff, that's where you had the birth of what eventually became the Polisario Front. I believe its original name was the Embryonic Movement for the Liberation of Seguia Alhambra and Rio de Oro. And I actually think I got that right, so I'm pretty proud of myself there. But it is interesting to see in this push to lay claim to the Western Sahara, you had the development of Sahrawi nationalism, Sahrawi national identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, but it just, yeah, no, it kind of, I think it says it goes back to what you said in this. Well, the power vacuum hadn't really developed yet because Spain was still there, and Spain was at that time very much trying to hold on to its colonial possessions in North Africa. But it was in this time of hardship when you had the war being fought for Ifni, when you had the Spanish crackdown, you had the development of Sahrawi national identity and Sahrawi desire for independence. And I just think it's interesting to see how these events are interconnected. And in a way, it's kind of like, dominoes. As one fell over, it led to another and brought us to our current situation.
Yeah, that's true. Totally agree. Yeah, I think.
Just to be clear, I think one thing we should say is even though we are giving our opinion here a little bit, when we do talk about, the history behind things, we're not taking a side. We're just trying to present history as it was.
That's very important to mention that because, we saw that sometimes in the comments, and not often, but we saw that people basically say we are on one side or another. It's, for many or for some guys, it may seem sometimes we are picking sides, but we really try not picking sides.
Yeah.
That's why mostly when we check out these things, we try to see that from both sides of the conflict. And we are trying our best to stay as neutral as possible. Of course, that's not always possible because that's just how humans are.
Well, and also we go off the information we have that we think is trustworthy. And there's, obviously there can be biases and stuff like that. So it's nothing's 100%, but to the best of our abilities, we do try to present, not prevent, events from a historical perspective. We're just looking at it as a historical overview, not advocating one side good, one side bad, something like that.
But why did you get rid of the word prevent? Because, if we report about historical incidents, we kind of prevent that from repeating.
I guess you could say that.
No, but yeah, I think that was very important what you pointed out, that we really try our best not to pick any side. So if you got ever the feeling we are on a side or another, I'm sorry, we are sorry, but that was not our intention. So I think that's it for.
Well, I was going to wrap it up with this. What do you think is going to happen next? Because Morocco essentially controls the majority of, they do control the majority of the Western Sahara. They now have much more diplomatic recognition over said claims. And yes, the Polisario Front is now, it scrapped the peace deal and stuff, but it's kind of like, well, does that really matter in a way? The situation seems to be where Morocco has, they have an advantage diplomatically, I think, and they definitely have an advantage in terms of military capabilities, at least in my opinion.
And what also is the point, I think they have momentum.
Yeah.
And yeah, I kind of feel that. I feel like in 50 years, there are just going to be very few people who say that Morocco doesn't have a claim on that, or doesn't possess the area, because it seems everything is pointing into the direction that Morocco is going to take control of it. If it's going to be military or whatever, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a huge military conflict. I just think the Polisario Front will kind of fade out.
Well, and in part, the conflict made this situation when you think about it, because think about all of the Sahrawi people who had to leave Western Sahara and went into the refugee camps in southwestern Algeria. Conflict forces people to move, and the situation is what it is now because of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I kind of feel like they have the momentum behind them. I mean, Morocco.
Yeah.
There was also something that I was reading about the European Union also like getting more involved in that, but that was a while ago. I don't remember what that was.
Well, the
But
big one though was in January 2021. I mean, stuff was already beginning in 2020, but with the US.
oh, that wasn't it that one where we had to go back to the episode
Yeah, actually
to
the
redo
episode
some parts?
the episode was done when that came out. So we had we had to edit that. But no, to your point, there's a number of countries both within the African Union and within the EU that have, you know, given support to Morocco, claims of sovereignty over the Western Sahara. So, and then vice versa, to be fair, there's plenty within, especially the African Union, who still support Sahrawi, statehood, independence. So it's like the issue is not resolved in any sense of the word, but I would agree with you. Things seem to be swinging in one direction much more so as of late.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think Morocco is going to gain control over the area completely within the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll wait and see. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And yeah, and if you haven't seen the actual episode, be sure to click the link. We'll have one in the description. There probably will be a card at the front of this podcast as well. So you can just click on that. And
comment, like, share. Like it's, I think a lot of people maybe don't know this, but it really does help.
Oh, it does. And
if it's just a simple like, that's already good enough. I mean, not necessarily in this episode, but in general in episodes, or a simple comment like good video. A lot of people don't know that, but it really helps out a lot.
Oh, no, it definitely does with the algorithm. And also then, of course, if anyone wants to share ghost countries to be covered or just their opinion on anything, I mean, we do love hearing from you guys. So
yeah, definitely. The most interesting comments are those when we really hear what the people like about the episode, or if they have suggestions on what to cover or what they would change if it was only about them.
And also probably worth saying, I mean, I think most of our subscribers know about this already, but we have access to the community tab. So we are posting text, comments, not comments, but memes, polls, a whole bunch of stuff up there. So check it out if you haven't. And we love to hear from you guys over there, especially when we're talking about stuff for the future direction of the channel. So, or just feedback in general.
Yeah, exactly. Like, especially in this regard, it's very important that we sometimes ask people, what do you think about this stuff on our channel? What would you like to see next? And the whole stuff, this is all going to be on the community tab. So, check it out once in a while. And if we ask something, give your opinion on this if you don't mind.
Yeah. But anyway, guys, that about does it for this episode. Like I said, feel free to check out the actual episode if you haven't. And see you again next time.
I hope you like this shorter version of the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, still, what are we at? Almost 35 minutes thereabout, but still not too long.
Okay. But in general, we try to keep them between, at 25 minutes.
Thereabout. So it's a little more condensed. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.